Greetings, comrades. Thank you all for coming. I'm very happy with the turnout. So my name is Ryan. I joined the Socialist Party beginning of this year. Around a month ago, I agreed to speak tonight on the topic, can capitalism be reformed? This is the first time I've given a speech at a meeting, and I'd be lying if I said I wasn't nervous, but let's dive right in. So the question before us tonight is, can capitalism be reformed? And it might surprise you to hear me say this, but the answer is, in short, yes. There are countless examples throughout history of attempts that have been made to reform capitalism and make it less harsh on the working class. I'd first like to focus on an example of very significant reform, the New Deal that was brokered during the Great Depression in 1930s America. At the time, being a member of the working class was incredibly challenging. In 1933, unemployment rates soared to as high as 25%, meaning 1 in 4 workers didn't have a job. This was evidently a time when capitalism was in crisis, and in response to this crisis, the New Deal was brokered. The New Deal comprised a series of state programs, public work projects, and financial reforms and regulations enacted by President Franklin Roosevelt. The New Deal achieved several important reformations for the working class of 1930s America. It provided a guaranteed state pension for anyone over the age of 65. It introduced unemployment checks for those who found themselves jobless through no fault of their own. It established a minimum wage for the first time in America, and it created government jobs to reduce unemployment. Now, the New Deal stands as a clear example of a lot of reformation happening in a relatively short window, as all these reformations were introduced between 1933 and 1939. And I chose to start by focusing on it for that reason. But we can also see examples of how reformation has improved capitalism in the United Kingdom as well. In the UK, workers' rights have been fought for and won through reformations. The creation of the National Health Service in 1946, which aimed to provide universal and free benefits to all in need, stands as one of the most significant examples of this, and is a right that workers in countries like the US still haven't earned today. As well as the NHS, trade unions in the UK have also fought for laws granting workers minimum wage, annual leave, sick pay, a 2-day weekend, workplace safety regulations, maternity and paternity leave, protection against discrimination, and countless more rights. So clearly, it seems irrefutable that capitalism can be reformed. Thank you all for listening to my speech, and I hope you have a pleasant rest of the evening. All jokes aside, the point I now want to make clear is that the ability to reform capitalism does not mark the end of our efforts. It's crucial to ask ourselves further questions beyond whether or not capitalism can be reformed. Questions such as, is reformation enough, or should our goal solely be to reform capitalism? And in response to these questions, I'd like to present a couple more points. First and foremost, it's crucial to remember that when we propose and attempt to instigate reformation, the capitalists' initial response is to resist such changes as they don't align with the interests of the capitalist class. And if they cannot prevent reformations from happening, it's only a matter of time before they seek to take back and undo the few liberties they've unwillingly allowed us. The history of reformation can be likened to a constant tug of war between capitalists and the workers those capitalists seem to exploit. To put it differently, if the working class manages to secure a favourable, more compassionate form of capitalism, while leaving the capitalist system intact, capitalists will inevitably seize the opportunity to revoke the very reforms that made this version of capitalism more favourable in the first place. We can observe this historical pattern when we reflect on the New Deal I mentioned earlier. Since the 1930s, we can see most of the reformations achieved by workers during that time have been systematically dismantled by the capitalist class. One example of this is that the number of government-provided jobs provided by the New Deal has drastically decreased. And another example is that the minimum wage in the United States has not seen an increase since 2009, despite inflation continuously rising. And when we look across the pond, we can see that similar issues can be observed in the UK, where the rights fought for by unions and the working class are being constantly eroded by the capitalist class. Although our minimum wage has increased, it has not kept pace with the cost of living, resulting in real terms pay cuts for most workers. And the way the Tories are handling the NHS makes it evident to anyone paying attention that they are seeking ways to privatise it. A particularly prominent and particularly concerning example of the aims of the capitalist class is their continuous attacks on workers' rights to strike and rights to protest, the two most significant avenues for the working class to make their voices heard. At times like these, it's worth remembering that the reforms that resulted in our minimum wage and the NHS were not gifts bestowed upon us by the capitalist class out of the goodness of their hearts. They were in fact hard-won victories achieved through years of struggle by trade unions and the working class. Another issue with reformation I'd like to address is that it fails to address the inherent contradictions found within the heart of capitalism. At its core, Capitalism generates wealth for a minority capitalist class through the exploitation of the majority working class. It is the intention of every capitalist to maximise profit and minimise costs, and in order to compete, even the kindest capitalist who will claim to care about his workers will be compelled to cut costs in order to compete with other capitalists. And this is what Marx referred to as the coercive laws of competition. Clearly, the capitalist interests are fundamentally opposed to those of the workers. The capitalist wants to keep their costs as low as possible, while the worker strives for higher wages. So here we have one of the major contradictions within capitalism. But this contradiction does not end with the struggle between the two classes, which we creatively refer to as class struggle. For as capitalists continue in their efforts to decrease wages and increase costs, they are inadvertently diminishing the purchasing power of the working class, as the workers are not only the producers of goods, but are also the consumers the goods are intended for. Therefore, as capitalists continue to raise prices and lower wages, they are essentially shooting themselves in the foot, since there will be fewer consumers able to afford the increased price of their products and services. The capitalist response to this is the creation of credit, which in reality just delays and increases the severity of the issue. No matter how many reforms we implement, the unethical foundation of capitalism remains unchanged. The capitalist class is both capable and incentivized to fight back against reformation, and this is precisely why we need to strive for more than just reformation. Considering all of this, should we view reformation as a negative thing? Should we, as socialists, disregard attempts to reform and focus all our efforts elsewhere? To this, I firmly believe the answer is a no. Any attempt to alleviate the hardships of capitalism on the working class is a worthwhile endeavour, and as socialists, we should actively aid in reformation. However, it is crucial to recognise that reformation alone is not the ultimate goal. Don't allow anyone to deceive you into thinking that our fight is over once we achieve reform. Reformation serves as a stepping stone. It is merely a tool that can be used to pave the way for revolution. To quote from Noam Chomsky, revolution, if it is to be constructive, it has to come about from the majority of the population coming to recognise that the changes they want cannot be instituted within the framework of existing constitutions. That means a dedicated revolutionary is a reformist. A dedicated revolutionary will press the institutions as far as possible to yield to popular demands. And then, when the population realises it can't be done anymore, then you can talk about a revolution. So, to conclude, yes, capitalism can be reformed, and that is made evident from looking at several historical examples. But what is also evident when we examine history, and also society today, is that reformation cannot be the end game. The reforms we achieve can and will be taken back at the first opportunity the capitalists get. So while reformation is a valuable tool, it alone cannot bring about the world we all want to see. For that, we need revolution.